We are in the process of exploring the path to the Palace of Nowhere. That is, each of the sessions focuses on a particular aspect of the self-transforming journey. And what's being reflected on here specifically is how prayer and meditation are themselves aspects of the path to the Palace of Nowhere. That is, they are modalities of the transformation of consciousness, the realization of the true self, one with God. In this session, I'll begin by sharing some basic background information on contemplative prayer and meditation as they are customarily approached within the Christian tradition. This broader frame of reference will provide a context toward the end of the session in focusing specifically on how Thomas Merton tends to speak of contemplative prayer. This particular session will then provide a basis that will allow us in the following session to look in even closer detail at the transforming power of prayer and meditation. As an initial observation, it's helpful to realize, I think, that unless we're faithful to some time of meditation and prayer, our commitment to a contemplative way of life tends to remain at the level of an ideal, or a philosophical point of view, or a reassuring way to look at life. And as beautiful and as helpful as a contemplative way of life is at this level, it does not yet attain to what a contemplative way of life essentially is. For a contemplative way of life is essentially a way of life that's committed to a process of self-transformation, or to yielding ourself over to the metamorphosis of the foundations of consciousness, in which our deepest sense of who we really are is realized to be a oneness with who God really is. It is this ineffable oneness with God that constitutes the fulfillment of the contemplative way. Prayer and meditation are ways of yielding ourself over to this self-metamorphosizing process. It's allowing our contemplative understanding of life to prompt us to set aside all thoughts, all considerations, all ideals, and all perspectives as being big enough or rich enough to yield over what our heart longs for, which is the direct realization of this ineffable union. An analogy can be made to human relationships, in which there is a distinct difference between two people who are casual acquaintances, or two people who sometimes get together to share ideals or to enjoy each other's company, as compared to two people who are drawn into a relationship of deep oneness with each other. This is not enough for them. They are not fulfilled except in mutually surrendering themselves over or making themselves mutually vulnerable to ever deeper levels of oneness with each other in their love for each other. And so this contemplative path is this path that comes to fulfillment in oneness, and in this we see the necessity of meditation and prayer in terms of an inner imperative of the heart, to not rest content with anything less than the oneness that fulfills it. It might be helpful, too, at the outset of our reflections, to clarify a few basic terms that are often used in the Christian tradition with respect to meditation and prayer, and to briefly relate these terms as to how they're used in the non-Christian contemplative traditions. Three basic terms are the terms spiritual reading, meditation, and contemplation. In spiritual reading, or Lectio Divina, one's reading is the prayer, For example, if one is praying the Scriptures, and one prays, "My shepherd is the Lord, there is nothing I shall want," one does not read the verse and then pray, or pray and then read the verse, but rather the reading of the verse is the prayer. And in the Christian tradition, there is power in the Word to awaken within the heart the truth the words express, so that to pray, "My shepherd is the Lord, there is nothing I shall want," the truth of the verse works as a leaven in the heart, awakening the direct realization that the Lord is our shepherd. This is a profound form of prayer, really, because in understanding spiritual reading as prayer, it means to accept in faith that the words of the living God are in our own mouth, and God is as close to us as our own speech that's speaking His word. And there's power in the word to transform our hearts, and this is spiritual reading. So Scripture would be the normative reading, but it would then apply to all reading that speaks directly to our hearts and offers guidance and encouragement in the path of self-transformation. Lectio Divina, or spiritual reading as prayer. Meditation, as used in the Christian traditions, almost always refers to discursive meditation, meaning meditation using thoughts and images. Spiritual reading and meditation naturally work together, in that, as one reads the verse, one stops and allows the verse to initiate an inner dialogue between oneself and God as to how the truth of this verse is active in one's life today. So, for example, one might read, "Beside restful waters you give me repose." And one might pause and ask, what are these restful waters? Are these restful waters this relationship in my life, this work in which I'm able to provide service to others? Is it this very moment that I'm praying here now? The verse is a leaping off place for an inner dialogue with the concreteness of God's presence in one's own daily lived experience. But the key is that in the meditation practice, the prayer is the thought, the prayer is the image. And so here is the power of thought when expressed as an act of faith to embody prayer. For the thoughts of God, or the thoughts to God, or the thoughts about God are the prayer, meditation.